Welcome back to Total Disclosure, the podcast. My name's Ty, and I am your host. We have a great show tonight. One of my favorite people in the world, and I'm so excited. Mr. Michael Strat is here, so let's get him on in here. How you doing, Mr. Michael?
Good to be with you. Good to be with you. Great. Doing good.
Thank you. Sorry, I was having a little trouble hearing because there's three things started playing in the background.
Okay.
I am sorry about that.
No problem.
But military aviation historian, you've done so much work with you in the UFO topic. I think you're in like every documentary I've ever watched on the subject.
Maybe.
It's crazy.
Maybe.
You make your rounds.
Maybe. So, we do what we can here.
Yeah. So tonight we decided that we were going to talk about crash retrievals, UFO crash retrievals, to be specific. Now, I just had a conversation with Mr. Tim Burchett, congressman out of Tennessee, and I tried talking to him and getting him to open up about some of the crash retrievals. Obviously, he spearheaded the UFO hearings that David Grusch was a part of, and we got to hear a little bit about before Roswell, and that this cover-up may predate a lot of the preconceived notions of modern day ufology. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, at least to start.
I concur with that because we've got multiple crash retrievals from 1946 at Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. We've got Cape Girardeau, 1941. If the Italy case is to be believed, that's 1933. So there's multiple cases prior to Roswell. Absolutely.
Right. And, Tim and I were talking about the OSAP program and Jim Lukatsky claiming that he had breached the hull of a UFO. And, David Grusch also had said that Lockheed wanted to get rid of or get new eyes on some of the material that they were in possession of, and they were set to deliver but basically a UFO to OSAP, the program. And that was the ultimate goal, and why Robert Bigelow got the money to retrofit his facility to take on a project like that. It ultimately was thwarted by the CIA. But I think it's really, really interesting to think. I mean, how long have these crash retrievals, and how long have we had potential alien craft, potential alien technology?
Well, at least 70 to 80 years. And that's borne out by a lot of firsthand military witnesses from Leonard Stringfield, who were at the site where craft were loaded onto 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks sent to Wright Patterson Air Force Base. We've got other medical personnel who were in charge of the autopsies, the pathologist reports, the X-ray lab technicians. This is all within the Stringfield collection.
Right. And it's just when so many people are telling you that there's something to this.
Right.
It really does start to solidify. I mean, we're in the age of information, and it could be a blessing and a curse, if you will, kind of, right? Because with information comes misinformation, deception, and it seems that in government there's this battle for disclosure, and it's like it's we're waiting to see who's going to win out, but civilians like yourself have done tremendous work at looking at some of these cases and kind of extracting the truth to a degree. And Roswell is a huge case. It's obviously the most well-known UFO crash and probably UFO case. So I mean, you've done a lot of work on it, and I just want to, thank you for that, first of all. But I want to hear more about what you've uncovered.
Okay, so and we can share screen whenever you want. But what I've been doing the last, I'd say, it's almost been 4 years now, is I've been doing a deep dive into the firsthand military witnesses that were procured by Leonard Stringfield. over about a 30-year period, he collected dozens and dozens of firsthand witnesses who guarded craft in hangars, who guarded ET bodies and formaldehyde preservation liquid tubes, underground facilities at Wright Patterson Air Force Base, also at Eglin Air Force Base. And, they absolutely do diversify their portfolio. So you've got things at Edwards North Base Complex, you've got things at Homestead Air Force Base, you've got things at MacDill Air Force Base. And these are the type of witnesses that I like to drill down on. And going through the book that Leonard had published, there's about 119 crash retrieval cases there. And I like to just make the point that all we need is one of these to be correct. So these legacy witnesses, the numbers are in our favor, absolutely in our favor.
Absolutely. And like you said, if just one of these cases is legit, then the implications for that are
absolutely
they're wild. And it affects every single person on this planet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why during World War II, this subject matter was classified higher than the atomic bomb. It was classified above top secret. And that's where Timothy Good got the name of his book, Above Top Secret. So when we talk about crash retrievals, and this is the literally everything, it's wrapped up in everything. All of this is the retrievals, the body, the debris. It's the holy grail that's going to be the vehicle that really manifests disclosure here.
Absolutely. And I'd love you could share your screen whenever.
Okay.
No problem, and we can get into that.
Sure.
But the crash retrieval part is it's not touchy, but many people, or skeptics, if you will often say, if these craft are so advanced and if they're coming from so far away and they're, thousands and thousands of years ahead of us in intelligence, how are they crashing? And I find it an interesting question. It does perplex me that if they can traverse the cosmos or dimensions themselves, how are they crashing? And it leads me to think that there was a couple accidents and then we developed weaponry to bring them down.
I think the best way to comment on that is what we're hearing about crashing is not necessarily motherships crashing. We're hearing about scout ships crashing. That's the first thing. And absolutely, to go with what your further statement is there absolutely appears to be a rogue element within the military-industrial complex that is targeting, tracking, and shooting these things down to exploit their free energy systems and their weapons advancement technology. That appears to be what's going on here. Yes.
So kind of like what David Grusch said when he referred to a secret Cold War.
A secret Cold War. Yeah. No checks and balances, no public scrutiny, no congressional oversight. This is a whole different thing now. This is outside the realm of the United States elected government officials. This is completely something else, because the senators and congressmen, the House Arms and Services Committee chairman, they do not have access to this information. They don't have a high enough security clearance to get read in on these programs. And that's the problem we're running into associating these with congressional hearings.
Yeah. And it's funny because I often think back upon the OSAP, just the OSAP program, just the three people that signed off on it. Ted Stevens, who had seen a UFO. Daniel Inouye gives an incredible speech about a government that does a shadow government. Yes. And then Harry Reid, who's longtime friends with Robert Bigelow, George Knapp, and has had ongoing conversations about, UFOs. And if they're not even read in, right? These are the highest of the high, the gay.
This is the crown jewels here. We're dealing with the crown jewels. This is the varsity team we're dealing with here. These guys don't play around. This is for keeps,
This is for, do you think there's a possibility of such thing as like a secret space program?
Absolutely. Absolutely, without a
Interesting.
doubt, without a doubt, because we've
Interesting.
been spending $100 million per day on classified black programs during the Clinton administration. That was
Right.
$100 million per day we were blowing on all this stuff. Yeah,
Right. Right. Let's
sure.
get into your PowerPoint here. I love the
No
name, by the
problem.
way.
Oh, yeah?
Retrievals. Yeah, retrievals of the third kind.
Mhm,
Cosmic
yeah,
crashes.
this is an homage to Leonard Stringfield. So yes, let's go ahead and start here. Retrievals of the third kind, cosmic crashes, corpses, and cover-ups. We will continue on here. It is the holy grail of ufology. It absolutely is, because this is the vehicle that is going to facilitate disclosure, because within the crash retrievals, we've got the craft, we've got the bodies, and we've got the debris. And everybody knows that we don't need any more CE1 cases. We don't need any more lights in the sky reports and sighting. We don't need that. We're decades beyond that. What we need now is nothing short of the physical hardware. That's the point where we're at right now. You know, everybody asks about the evidence, and you need extraordinary evidence to support these claims. Well, it's true, you do. And that's why the crash retrievals are really the most important. I won't go through all this here, but I'll just state that I want to kind of give people an idea of where Leonard got this information. So this is 3-star U.S. Air Force generals, U.S. Air Force fighter pilots, astronauts, commercial pilots, air traffic controllers, neurosurgeons, pathologists, theoretical physicists, and mathematicians, U.S. Army officers, U.S. Navy officers, military police, high-level Pentagon officials, top military brass, scientists and engineers who worked at Wright Patterson Air Force Base and other government facilities. So this is just a brief overview of the very high-level military firsthand witnesses that Leonard dealt with to get his information. So this isn't just somebody saw something. This is an actual military personnel, rank, file number, DD-214. These are documented sources here. Let's continue on. A couple of quick quotes. Number one, UFO crash retrievals can't be real, because if they were, I would have read about in the local newspaper. That's number one. Number two, there are not now, nor ever have been, any extraterrestrial visitors or equipment on Wright Patterson Air Force Base. This is their press release, July 1980. That's what they're telling us. This is the official Air Force policy here. We've never had anything at Wright Patterson. There's no bodies, there's no craft. So what we're going to do as we go through here is it's going to be Leonard Stringfield's firsthand military witnesses up against the Air Force and their claim about there not being anything. And we're going to see who comes out on top here. This is the man of the hour. This is Leonard Stringfield. He is the originator who coined the term UFO crash retrieval. It all goes back to Leonard Stringfield. So when you hear about all this stuff in congressional hearings and this recent report about crash retrieval, it all filters back to Leonard Stringfield. And over a period of at least 2 decades, he had compiled just dozens and dozens of these firsthand military witnesses. This is what we want to talk about today. A couple of bio points here. He was born in 1920. He grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. By the time he graduated from high school in 1939, he already memorized the entire dictionary. They gave him a nickname. He was called Webster, because he literally remembered the entire dictionary. So if there was anyone on this planet that was qualified to take these reports, it was Leonard Stringfield. He joined the military as soon as he heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. After the war, he was employed by a chemical company in Ohio. He retired after 30 years. Now, he wrote 2 books, Inside Saucer Post 3-0 back in 1957, Situation Red, the UFO Siege back in 1977. The next point here is what we want to drill down on. His lecture on UFO crash retrievals at the 1978 MUFON Symposium in Dayton, Ohio, caused an international sensation. And the reason why is, number one, back in 1978, the whole concept of UFO crash retrievals was a new entity back then. And number two is Leonard was given permission to maintain an important part of our national history by retelling these accounts from his witnesses. But the agreement was that their names had to kept under wraps. And so there was absolutely pushback at the MUFON Symposium because nobody could independently verify these claims without the names. And so there was absolutely some pushback here. He passed away December 18th, 1994. And all we have now left are his status reports. And we're going to continue on here. Cincinnati Enquirer, July 19th, 1993. Author continues quest for truth about UFOs. Quote, what I've collected has staggering implications for mankind. This would be the biggest thing since Christ, really. It's a bold statement, but it's true. Even if one of these cases is authentic, it is the biggest thing. Absolutely. Let's continue on here. At one time, there were 22 bank boxes of original drawings, renderings. There were newspaper clippings. There were handwritten notes. There were sketches by the first-hand witnesses. That information should be tracked down and brought within these congressional hearings. We'll continue. Now, for anyone who wants to follow along with this, I want to give you the page number, the case number, the reference of where I'm getting this information. This comes from Leonard's book, UFO Crash Retrievals, the Complete Investigation Status Reports 1 through 7. That's where I'm getting all of this information. So if you want to read all of the intricate details, how many bodies were recovered, what the flight suits looked at, how they shipped it to Wright Patterson Air Force Base, how many craft were there, these are the kind of details that are in this book. However, when you start paging through this book, you're going to find out that it's very text heavy. It's all reading. It's not for the faint of heart. You have to have a real big interest in this subject. And there's no drawings, there's no photographs, there's no illustrations. So you're left with your own imagination to try to make up an idea of what these cases look like. So over the past 4 years, I've made it my crusade to commit these to refined drawings, and using those as a guide, I went to a full color rendering. And that's what I want to go over with you tonight here. I also want to mention Magic Eyes Only by my good friend Ryan Wood. So within the Stringfield book that I just showed everybody, there's 119 crash retrieval cases. Ryan's book, Earth's Encounters with Extraterrestrial Technology, has an additional 104 crash retrieval cases. So now we're pushing over 200. If we even knock out 50 of these, we're down to 150. We only need one. So the numbers are in our favor. I mean, it's at a point now where we can't lose. And that's why I want to take everyone to Las Vegas here. So we're going to take our trip to Las Vegas, and we're going to go to any one of these casinos. You can pick any one. We'll go to a roulette wheel, and let's just say they have 120 spaces, and we put down 119 chips representing our 119 crash retrieval cases. You can kind of see where this is going. We can't lose. It's a mathematical certainty. We can almost not lose. All we need is one to be correct, and the whole concept of UFO crash retrieval non-existence falls apart completely. So again, the numbers are in our favor. Let's continue on. I want to give credit to Rudy Gardea for doing all the original sketch work for this presentation. Okay, why don't we start here? You were talking about pre-Roswell cases. Well, here's one right here. This is 1942. This is at an Army base north of Georgia. It's page 319 in Leonard's book. So if anyone in Congress wants to get more details, here's your source. There's the page number. What they described is when this craft came down, it augured into the side of the building. It ripped open a hull breach on the side of the craft itself. Now, there were 3 levels. This thing is about 15 feet in diameter. It's 10 feet high. Rudy's drawn a detailed bubble view on the upper right-hand corner. So the upper deck had this display panel. There were buttons and switches there. Now, on the mid deck, which you can kind of see on Rudy's blow up here, there was a wraparound window. In back of that wraparound window was what looked like 4 bar stools. The bottom deck had an entryway hatch. Now, there were 4 crew members taken alive. They were about 5 feet tall, 90 pounds, large black eyes, milky white skin. This is all long before Roswell here. Now, according to the first-hand military witness, there was a series of what looked like hieroglyphic writings written along the bottom circumference of the craft itself. I'm going to do a blow up here. This gives you an idea of what these may have looked like. These were absolutely seen not only on the bottom of the craft, but on the inside upper dome section of the craft itself. And so, yep,
and
go ahead.
This seems to be a theme, if you will. We look
Yes.
at like things like Rendlesham, and Jim Penniston saying that it looked like Egyptian hieroglyphs. I always mess that word up. Hieroglyphs on it, and I find that to be very, very interesting, and at least a commonality that we can, start to draw maybe some conclusions, or at least
Absolutely.
begin.
Because this iconology and markings pops up on at least 7 or 8 other cases where we've got writing on the inside wall of the craft itself. So by default, what I believe this means is there has to be a transnational team of linguistic experts and engineers trying to decipher and encode, decode what these symbols mean. There has to be. They've got to have multiple 3-ring binders of this. So that's something that I always keep in mind here. That's got to be going on here. So this is kind of my first pass color illustration of what this may have looked like recovered back in 1942. Something like this was recovered back in 1942, long before Roswell. Let's continue on. Go ahead.
So you're saying, I'm just to clarify for anyone.
Yes.
So did it say that the crash happened at the base, or it would happen somewhere in North Georgia and it was taken to a base?
It happened on an Army base north of Georgia that even Leonard didn't know. He could not get that information. And it literally augured into the side of one of the buildings there and ripped open the hull on the side of the craft. That's talked about in the report. There's about
okay, so that was at the Army base. Oh yeah, geez.
At the Army base. Yeah, it was not brought there. It came down there. Yes. Yep.
Another commonality.
That's how that one went down. Now this one's interesting. This is Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. And we're calling it Wright Field because back in 1946, the U.S. Air Force didn't exist back then. So it was known as Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, back in 1946. We've got 2 witnesses on this case. One is an avionics mechanic and his 6-year-old son, Tex Martin. So we've got 2 witnesses. This is page 242, 243 in the book. Now, what you're looking at here is a period correct photograph of hangar complex number 4. It still exists today. The major hangar on the far right-hand side that you see here, this is hangar bay E. I've actually been inside this hangar before. I'm going to blow this up a little bit. And our witness, 6-year-old Tex Martin, he joined his father one day at Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, because he was getting really good grades. His father invited him along, so he came along. And they're in an adjoining cafeteria to that main hangar there. And there was this basically someone who was cleaning things up. I guess you could call him a janitor. He kind of thought that he wanted to buy this little boy a little soda here. The boy asked his father if it would be okay. He gave permission. So this janitor hands this 6-year-old boy a soda. And the second he did that, this doorway opened up that was going right inside the main hangar. I'm going to go on to the next slide here, and you can see our primary eyewitness. As the door was opened up, we had a military police guard walk through. This little boy looked inside this hangar because he was at the right place at the right time. He got a sneak peek inside there. What did he see? First of all, he said he saw 2 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks with unknown tarp debris. On the other side of that, there was about an 18-foot diameter dish-shaped craft with 2 rings wrapped around the outer circumference. It had tripod landing gear legs. It was off-white in color. And then he said there was approximately 3 ET bodies laying on the floor on stretchers, half covered up. This is coming from this witness. And his father saw this as well. So we don't have to rely on the testimony of a 6-year-old boy. His father saw this as well. So let's go on to the next drawing here. And this is kind of a reverse image. So we've done 180 degrees, and you can see our primary eyewitness peeking through the door in the background. And you've got the tractor trailers, you've got the tarp debris, they've got chains connecting the tarps, you've got the bodies on the ground. So what we're doing here on this drawing is we're roughing everything out. We're getting all the monuments in place. And then I'm going to go to Rudy's refined drawing. And now this is all coming into view now. You can kind of get an idea of what this looked like. So this thing was 20 feet in diameter. It had 2 rings wrapped around the outer circumference, sitting on tripod landing gear legs. And then you've got the ET bodies in the foreground laying on the hangar floor on stretchers. This is what was described by not only Tex Martin, but his father saw it as well. Now, he was reprimanded for all of this. He got in trouble big time, but we do have their names. We do have their testimony within the Stringfield collection. So what we want to do now, we're going to take Rudy's drawing as a guide, as a template. Follow this closely. We'll come up with a full color rendering by Joel Christopher Payne, and this is what we came up with just to make this come alive. And we want to preserve an important part of our national history. And, you know, we're a couple in here now, and we haven't even got to Roswell yet. Okay, so let's continue on. Go ahead. Yep.
That is, I mean, Wright Field has long been suspected of being the destination of this material inevitably. So no matter what case it is, you know, whether it's Roswell or something similar, it seems that Wright Patterson seems to always get involved somehow. So I'm wondering, do we think that this case was a craft? This one didn't just, you know, come through the hangar at Wright Pat. It looks like it was bussed in.
It was brought in. It was brought in. And to kind of go along the line of what we were just talking about here, the reason why craft in the 40s and 50s and 60s were brought to Wright Patterson Air Force Base for a number of reasons. Number one, they have the aeromedical lab there, so they can test the bodies, they can test the tissue samples, they can investigate the autopsy reports. Number two is they have the foreign technology division there, so they can test the tensile strength of the metals and the material. So it makes sense that they would ship things to Wright Patterson Air Force Base.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll continue on here. Now, same location, same date, 1946. However, in this case, our witness was a private in records management, and the source for this is Space, the Final Frontier, page 59 by Clark McClellan. I'm going to show you the cover of the book. This is what the cover of the book looks like. So if anyone wants to follow along, this is where I'm getting the information. Now, within the book is this sketch from the primary eyewitness. Now, this thing came in to Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, from Arkansas on a railroad flat car. So they shipped this thing all the way from Arkansas to Wright Patterson Air Force Base, known as Wright Field. Now, I want to mention that this thing was 15 feet in diameter. It was 7 feet tall, highly polished mirror reflective exterior, no visible seams, no welds, no socket head cap screws, no fasteners of any kind, no hex head fasteners, no rivets. This thing was very highly polished. It had a series. Go ahead. Yeah, it had a series of rectangular windows wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself. Again, this thing is 15 feet in diameter. Let me go to the next slide here. Here's my AutoCAD drawing that kind of shows you the layout of this thing. Now, if you look on the upper right, what I've done is I've peeled back the skin that shows you this central column that was 3 feet in diameter. It started at the bottom of the craft, went through the midpoint, terminating at the roof of the top of the craft itself. Now, if you look closely here, to the left of center, so one window left of center in my bottom drawing here, you'll see there's a red dot. That is the attempted point of entry with diamond tip drill bits. And this comes up 3 times within the Stringfield collection, where you have these white lab coat technicians that are desperately trying to breach these craft with diamond tip drill bits, and they can't do it. They cannot get inside. And what comes up at least 3 times.
Can you just, for anyone who doesn't know, can you explain the importance of why diamond tip drills and not being able to get through means anything?
Well, think about this. What if you could have an aircraft, for instance, a 3rd generation, 4th generation stealth fighter aircraft, that you reverse engineer the metallurgical technology, something that was recovered back in the 1940s, that could not be dented, could not be burned, could not be damaged in any way by a 16-pound sledgehammer, and it was light as a feather. If you made your aircraft out of that, you would rule the skies. And that appears to be what has been done here.
And
That is piercing data. Yep.
diamond being the creme de la creme of drill tips. It is you're using the only way to break into or cut through another metal is to use a stronger alloy metal.
Sure, sure.
Or you keep going up in that scale. Diamond being the pinnacle of strength, and they can't breach the hull with diamond tip drills.
It's very clear in the report that they had multiple teams of white lab coat technicians. They probably started out with stainless steel drill bits, but those drill bits snapped. Yep, they snapped and broke, and they got dull. And they said, you know what? We need something a lot harder, something that can pierce metals. And they tried that, and it failed. They could not get inside. That's the case on this one here. I'm going to go on to the next slide here. This is my very first pass kindergarten level illustration to give you an idea what this thing may have looked like, just kind of roughing it out here. I'm going to go to the next slide. Now here's Joseph Race full color rendering, much better than mine, but he's got everything correct here. He's peeled back the skin, which shows you this 3-foot diameter central column. Now there were no seats in this thing. There were no display panels in this. This could have been a drone. We don't know. But again, they could not get inside of this particular craft. And he's got the red dot on the left of center as well. So let's continue on here. So here's Rudy's drawing. So this private and records management, he goes into the hangar because he has to deliver a letter to one of the high-level military brasses there. He's met by his friend, who's a guard there, and this guy says, come here, I got something I want to show you. So he brings him into the hangar, kind of in the back of the hangar, and this craft is just sitting on the hangar floor. Now, off to the right, he said that there was a tarp that was partially folded up. In the foreground, there was an open toolbox with an electric drill and a diamond tip drill bit. And so that's where we're getting the whole concept here. And this pops up multiple times. This whole thing about diamond tip drill bits pops up multiple times within the Stringfield collection. So what we want to do now is we'll take Rudy's drawing as a guide, and I want to take you inside this hangar in a 3D world here and see if we can make this come alive. And this is what we came up with. Something like this was seen at Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, back in 1946. It could still be there today. I don't know. I'd love to go there and see, just like all the rest of us would, because we've been paying for this, right?
Right, yeah. These programs. And that's the problem. What do you think of I mean, the program, and I don't mean to cut you off here, but
it's fine.
The community, I kind of told you about this when we talked on the phone. The program name, Michael Schellenberger spoke about being Immaculate Constellation. And it kind of makes sense, because I don't know if you ever talked to Diana Pasoka, but her contact that she named in American Cosmic as Tyler, who works for NASA, I mean, he talks about all the esoteric backgrounds behind NASA. I mean, we know Operation Paperclip, you know, to bring the Nazi scientists over here and convert the what is it, the rocketry and to incorporate it into the space program. There's a lot of weird stuff going on there, but Tyler also claims that these crash retrievals, they view them as quote unquote gifts. So a program name like Immaculate Constellation, having a biblical set meaning and like a gift from the gods kind of feel, it just I feel like it goes together. So do you make anything of that? Do you think
well, you know, they could be hand-me-downs. They could be hand-me-downs. This could have been a drone. So yeah, that's possible. And the whole reference to constellation, obviously it's pointing toward the stars as being the origin point for all of this. So that checks out as well.
Right. I find it to be interesting because I don't know whether I'm being fed disinformation through, you know, the quote unquote UFO whistleblowers who've gone through the Dobson process, right? It's like, okay, when is a whistleblower? I mean, is Lou Elizondo a whistleblower? I don't necessarily think so, because, you know, he even says it himself that he'll protect national security at any cost, that he still works with the government. David Grusch also says these things. So I just always try to be clear about, I mean, we have to be careful about what we perceive as truth from the official narratives that are given to us. And like you said, you're just going through a list of crash retrievals. If even one of these happened, game over.
And that's the beauty of the Stringfield collection, because we don't have to rely on one witness. We don't have to rely on a lone wolf. What we're seeing here is multiple similar characteristics from different witnesses that all have this common denominator. For instance, the diamond tip drill bits. We've got the writing. Some of the man-made craft, they've got tubes, pipes, and cylinders on the bottom of the craft. So we don't have to rely on one person. And these people, even though they don't know each other, they're independently verifying the cases through these different witnesses. So that's the beauty of the Stringfield collection here. Now, who would have a need to know back in 46, 47 timeframe? This is a letter from Nathan Twining to Air Force Brigadier General George Shulgin, September 23rd, 1947. He says the phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious. Later on in this document, he talks about the flight path of these vehicles, the formation of the craft. It's a very interesting historical document. So this would have been a gentleman who probably had a need to know back in 47 timeframe. All right, we're going to go on to the next case here. Papagos Indian Reservation, west of Globe, Arizona, January 1947. We're still not at Roswell yet. This is north of Superstition Mountains. The primary eyewitness served in the U.S. Navy during World War II. This is page 93 in Leonard's book, case A10. I'm going to take you to the next slide here, and this is Rudy's drawing. So you've got two personnel. They're in a Jeep. They're going down this unimproved road, not too far from the Superstition Mountains, and they come across two military police. They're armed. They're challenged and stopped immediately. They're told, you're not supposed to be here. Get out of here immediately. And they were at the right place at the right time at the very initial stages of a retrieval operation. They got to see it all. Off to the left, another 50 feet down this unimproved road, was about a 30-foot diameter disc-shaped craft. It augured in at about a 35-degree angle. It had two rings wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself. There was an indented windows wrapped around the outer circumference and a low-rise dome on top. And they saw all of this. This is in the report. We've got the page number. So what we want to do now is use this as a template. We'll go to the full color rendering. And this is what we came up with just to kind of make this case come alive back in 1947. So if we had senators and congressmen who could be read in on this and actually had some teeth and some power to run this to ground, we could get the documents on this. We can get the photographic documentation in the form of 8x10 glossy black and white photographs. They've probably got motion picture film reel of this. So these things could actually be run to ground. Let's go to the next one. Go ahead.
I mean, just to be clear, if I was the government, if I was the military and that thing is sticking out of the ground, I am taking pictures. I am taking video. And
of course,
my problem with all of this is what if we're dealing with something like, well, it seems that we are dealing with it, but that all of these craft have gone to private aerospace, and that's how they keep them out of the public sector.
Well done. Well done.
Right? So how do you, Eisenhower literally stood there, a military general who ordered Normandy, warning us about the military industrial complex, right? And how powerful they could become. And with the technology I'm seeing in the ground right there, if it's true, they would be the all-powerful.
Correct.
Right.
That's why it was classified above top secret. Yep.
Right. Do you think Oppenheimer knew about UFOs?
I believe so. And I believe the AEC in conjunction with the United States Navy, was kind of the originators of running the cover-up. These two entities together, the Atomic Energy Commission, the United States Navy, were definitely involved in this, without a doubt, without a doubt. Now, we talk about the craft here. What I like to do as a side project is, obviously, I want to track down where the bodies went. I want to track down where the craft went, but I also want to track down what happened to the debris and the hardware. So within the reports from the Stringfield collection, there's a mention of something called Foote Brothers Gear and Machine Company. There's a one-page notation. I'm going to just go over this real quickly here. According to Robert Helmold, Foote Brothers Gear and Machine Company of Chicago conducted metallurgical analysis on pieces from a saucer that crashed in Arizona back in 1947. Now, it could be the case we just talked about. So here we've got this gear company that allegedly got this debris. So, of course, I started digging. I wanted to look at the background of what this company does. You know, who are they? What did they do? What do they manufacture? So let's go to Chicago Tribune, January 15th, 1955. It says, it makes gears as large as 21 feet in diameter and weighing 45,000 pounds, and others small enough to put on a watch chain. Its gears are found on airplanes of all types, including jets and helicopters. In a year, it will make thousands of different gears for use by industry. So if the United States military recovered something back in 1947, and they really weren't sure what they were looking at, but they had a small arc radius of material that might have some teeth on it, they'd be sending it to this company. So this checks out. They'd be sending it to this expert company that manufactures gears of all sizes. So it makes sense. Hendricks Commercial Register, 1909. You can kind of see the types of gears that this Foote Brothers Gear Machine Company actually makes. Let's do one more here. The purchasing agent, May 1923. These are the gears that this place makes. So yes, it absolutely is consistent with the location where you want to send some debris of unknown origin to see if they could reverse engineer the technology. It completely makes sense. All right, next one. White Sands Missile Range, July 4th, 1947. The primary witness was a technical sergeant in U.S. Army Air Force. This is page 196 in Leonard's book. So if anyone wants to follow along and get all the details, it's page 196 in the book. So we'll go to the next slide. When this thing came down, I should mention it was completely at night. This was large. This thing was 150 feet in diameter, tipped up at about a 20-degree angle. Again, this is at night. This thing was excruciatingly well lit. They had light-alls, they had spotlights, they had searchlights on this thing. They had people with Geiger counters walking around this thing checking to see if it was radioactive. They had people with still cameras taking photographs. They had other people with motion picture film reel cameras. So this was all documented on film. They got this one. They absolutely got this one documented. So let's go to the next slide here. This is the full color rendering of what this may have looked like at White Sands when this thing actually came down. Now, what is the actionable item that we want to take away on this particular case? So since still photography and motion picture film was recorded of this event, senators and congressmen with the appropriate security clearances should track down and utilize this evidence for future public hearings. And we hope, we pray that this information could be included in next month's congressional hearings. However, the problem we're running into is, number one, the senators and congressmen do not have a high enough security clearance to access this information, and they have not been read into these programs. So how can they talk about this? How can they get access to this if they don't have a high enough security clearance? That is the brick wall we're running into in Congress.
Right, because they see these people as temporary employees, right? I mean, the president, what was the last president that you think knew anything past the surface of UFOs, that was read into anything?
Probably Bush Sr.
My guess as well, but
Yep.
yeah, interesting.
Okay, let's continue on here. All right, UFO crash retrieval, 1947, seen at a warehouse at Berkeley University. Believe it or not.
What?
We have the name Albert Bruce Collins, now deceased. He was a metallurgical engineer. It's page 197 in the book. So here we've got this metallurgical engineer. He's at the right place at the right time when this 18-wheeler tractor trailer lowboy trucks come backing into the warehouse at Berkeley University. Now, what did he see? Let's go to the next slide. Here is what he said that he saw within the report. Now, this thing was 30 feet across. It looked like it was egg-shaped. It was 15 feet high. He said it literally looked like a cracked egg because there was a hull breach on the side of the craft, showing you the interior, which was a 36-inch diameter central core or egg yolk that was cylindrical, more of a beach ball type shape. Now, on the forward section of the craft, there was a composite panel. There was another composite panel that wrapped around the outer circumference of this interior yoke. And he also said that on the bottom right of the craft, there was a hull breach with debris and shrapnel pointing out. So we believe there was an interior implosion within this craft. So what we want to do now, yep, that's how this went down, because it was pointing out. So something was going on. There might have been a hull breach, an implosion, something was going on. This thing is about 30 feet across as it's being backed in. I'm going to go to the next slide. This gives you an idea of what pulled into Berkeley University warehouse back in 1947. It could still be there today. So congressmen, senators, House Armed Services Committee members should be tracking this down. We've got the paperwork on this. All right, let's continue on here. We'll go to the next one. Carrot Patch, south of Salinas, California, July, August 1947. This was seen by two 19-year-old workers. I mean, they're literally in a carrot patch. The night prior to this craft came down, it was found by the foreman. When the two boys ended up showing up for work next morning, the foreman walked over to these two boys and said, "Hey, I think you got to take a look at this." So he alerted the two 19-year-old workers. I'm going to go to the next slide here. And this is what they saw. This is from the original Stringfield dictation notes, the original sketch. 9 feet in diameter, a double row of indented windows wrapped around the outer circumference, a flat top, 4 feet tall. This was not a large craft by any means. Now, what's unique about this case, very unique actually, is X marks the spot. We've actually got a map of where this thing came down. You can see Gonzales there. You've got the freeway off to the left. We got Monterey, but I could probably take you, and it's kind of running just east of the 101 here. Back in 1947, when this thing came down, I could probably take you within plus or minus 200 feet where this came down. We could be at the site where this thing came down if we had this map back at that time. But yeah, in this case, we do have the actual map. So here's my first pass kind of AutoCAD drawing to show you what this thing looks like. This was not a large craft, about 4 feet tall, 9 feet in diameter. Here is the first pass SolidWorks rendering, just to give you an idea. Now, this whole concept of double row of indented windows, that pops up in about 3 other cases.
I was going to say, we're seeing some common themes in the craft
Yes, we
type.
are. Yes, we are.
So, in the window structure and how it just the craft, they all have very similar features, and it's actually interesting. It interests me.
It's popping up, and so that's why it's so important to look at the common denominator and this tapestry that runs through all these cases, because they're self-confirming, even though they're separated by time and space. So here's Rudy's drawing what this looked like back in 47. Now, one of these 19-year-old workers, he got up enough courage to walk over and he kicked the side of this thing. He made contact with this. Within 5 minutes, there was a convoy of military vehicles that arrived on site. There were 2 Jeeps. There was a 6x6 covered troop transport towing a trailer. They were told to evacuate the area, so they walked about another 1/8 mile down the road, but they were close enough to see the entire operation. They saw the military personnel manhandle this craft, put it onto the trailer. They covered it with a tarp, put chains over the tarp, and moved it out of the location. So they got to see the entire retrieval operation. So we're going to take this drawing from Rudy. We'll use that as a guide. We'll go to the full color rendering, and this is what we came up with. So this is Salinas, California UFO crash retrieval, and they probably have this in a warehouse, maybe at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Who knows? Who knows?
So when he kicked this craft,
Yep.
Was there anything else to come out of that? Because,
Nope.
you know, we hear about people who get too close to these things.
No,
have
there
problems.
was no other response. So that was it. No,
But
that was
it looks
all.
like they're getting more intricate as we go, right? They're they're detecting or searching for radiation. It's like
Correct.
they're learning with each recovery how to keep it out of the public's eye better and better and better.
Correct. That's correct. Let's continue on here. Now, I want to mention Danny Sheehan. He plays an interesting role in this story here because he, as most people know, he obtained degrees from Harvard University and Harvard Law School. He's a large advocate for UFO disclosure and transparency. This is something that most people know. But I want to talk about something he was involved in that's directly related to our storyline here. And in 1977, he was given a one-time only special security clearance to view some very interesting files at the Library of Congress. I'm going to go to the next slide here. Now, these were the classified files specifically associated with Project Blue Book. These files are not to be confused with the unclassified Project Blue Book records, which have long since been declassified and sent to the National Archives in Washington, D.C. The photos were accessed by Danny Sheehan at the Madison Building basement during January of 1977 under the direction of the Congressional Science and Technology Committee and Marcia Smith at the Congressional Research Service. So I'm just providing the details of how and where he got to see these files. All right, so where are the classified Project Blue Book files? Now, that really is the $24 million question. Where are the classified files? That's what we want to answer. Now, so he goes to the Library of Congress. This is January 1977, to the James Madison Memorial Building. That's where all this went down. I'm going to give you a top view looking down now. You can see the United States Capitol. If we go off to the right, you've got the Library of Congress. If we go directly south of that, we have the Madison Memorial Building, and that's what we want to focus in on. So according to Danny, he gets into an elevator. He goes down into the basement. Elevator doors open up. He walks down this long corridor hallway where he's met by two military guards where they check his ID. It's Danny. They let him into kind of this medium-sized room. And when he walks into this medium-sized room, I'm going to go to the next slide here. What he sees is a microfilm projector. Off to the right, there's a little bit of a mobile dolly that has files on it and cardboard boxes that are secured by a little bit of a string that have these microfilm reels in there. So now he's sitting down at this microfilm reader and he's kind of debating how he should spend his time here. And his first thought was, you know, I don't have a lot of time. This could be my only opportunity to be here. I don't have enough time to go through all of these documents individually. So what he did is he pulled out one of these microfilm reels. He fed it through the reader, picked it up on the other pickup, and he started looking at the documents within this microfilm reader. And he's going through everything, and all of a sudden, 3 photographs pop up, and they depict a wintertime scene of a UFO crash retrieval operation. There's 4 people there. They're all wearing winter parkas. They have a furry flange along their hoods. 3 of the men are taking photographs with still cameras, and they're taking photographs of a 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that augured in at a 30-degree angle. It has a low-rise dome on top. There's a series of hieroglyphic type lettering wrapped around the outer circumference of the lower part of the upper dome. And there's another personnel off to the left. He's the 4th guy. He was wearing that same parka here. And what he was doing is he was taking motion picture film reel footage of the entire event. What you're looking at here on the bottom right-hand corner is a napkin drawing of what Danny drew for me when I was sitting next to him 4 months at the restaurant, of these hieroglyphic writings that were wrapped around the outer circumference. So let's go to the next slide here. What did the craft actually look like here? What did it actually look like? Well, we'll go to the next slide. If you look at Danny's napkin drawing, you can kind of see his rough drawing. So this is a side view tipped up at a 30-degree angle. You've got the dome there, you've got the hieroglyphic type writing, and then sitting right next to me across the table was Danny. Rudy was sitting right next to me as Danny was feeding us details. So Rudy started roughing out everything. So we've got the craft there on the upper drawing. We've got the people in place. I'm going to go to the next slide here. And this shows you the details that we wanted to put down. So the craft was 30 feet in diameter, came up at a 30-degree angle. Craft had hieroglyphic writing on the upper dome. When this thing augured in, it left a debris trail. And when it came to a stop, it built up a berm or kind of a debris section or mound of dirt on the right-hand side. There were 4 men in the scene. 3 had cameras. 1 had a dual reel motion picture film camera. Now, he did not know the date or location of where this went down. Somewhere between 1948 to 1961. I'm going to go to the next slide. All 4 men were wearing these winter parkas with the furry flange. 3 of them had these still cameras, so they were taking photographs of all of this. I'm going to go to the next slide. The 4th guy had a dual reel shoulder mounted motion picture film camera. So he was documenting this whole thing. This is a blow up of the symbols that were seen on the bottom of the dome. And I'm going to go to the next slide. This is the cleaned up version of what these symbols actually look like here. So I want to take you through the refining process here of how we got to a complete refined drawing here. And we're going to start with Rudy's drawings. And you can see here, this is kind of roughing it out. We've got the monuments in place. We've got the tip up angle. I'm going to go to the next slide here. Over on this one, you can see the berm built up on the right-hand side. You've got the men in place. This is all in the rough stage, the kind of beginning stages of all this. This is almost a direct side view looking at the side of the craft tipped up. We've got the men in place here. Let's continue on. Now, we want to take a look at this one. This is the correct placement of the men in this scene, and you've got the correct dish-shaped craft. However, when we showed this to Danny, he said that this was not the correct orientation. So what we ended up having to do is rotate the whole scene 180 degrees, and you end up with something that starts looking like this. This is a direct side view, but if we keep rotating another 90 degrees, we're going to end up with something that looks like this. And this is what we use to go ahead and create the refined drawing. And I'm going to hit you with our refined drawing. And this has been confirmed with Danny as being the most accurate drawing that's been made, with the exception of the actual photograph that he saw back in 1977 at the Madison Building in Washington, D.C. So this is about as close as we're going to get to the actual photograph itself. We've got the winter scene. We've got the 4 men. We've got the winter parkas. We've got the dish-shaped craft. We've got the still cameras, and we've got the motion picture film reel. So this checks all of the boxes here.
Any correlation between the symbols? Are we seeing any repeated symbols?
Well, he definitely said that they were written completely around the outer circumference of the lower dome. And I believe there probably were some repeating symbols here. This is something that we could certainly clarify with Danny, but I do believe that there were some repeating symbols.
I mean, throughout cases. So are we
throughout
seeing
cases.
are we seeing any commonality? I wonder if we probably wouldn't have that if we had access to all the information, maybe.
Oh, sure.
But because we lack that, You
That's
know,
right. That's
we
right.
can't, but yeah, that'd be interesting to actually know, like to be able to figure that out.
Right. So I didn't want to just stop here, though. I wanted to see if I could take this to the next level and see if we could get some photorealism here. So what I ended up doing is I put out a call for a UFO crash retrieval illustration contest. And I had entries from all around the United States. I had people that entered my contest from all over the world. And I want to hit you with some of the best renderings here. I won't go through all the criteria, but it's that same type criteria. It had to be 30 feet diameter, had to be period correct. So let me hit you with some of our best representations here. Now, there is a theoretical limit to what results you can achieve by typing prompts into an AI image generator. You still need the human touch. So bottom line is, you can type prompts in all day long and you won't get exactly what you're looking for. You still need the human touch. So let me go ahead and walk you through a couple of the entries here. So this was one. Yep. Yep. I was hoping for that reaction. So
That's
this is
real
what we came up
nice.
with. Yep. This is, this was seen by Danny Sheehan. They have the microfilm reel. We know where it was seen. I mean, we know it was at the Madison building. And I asked Danny, I go, how did these get here? He said that they brought the files from off-site. So obviously, wherever the classified files for Project Blue Book are, they were brought from off-site onto the Madison building site. So who knows where that might be? Maryland, it could be another location, could be Andrews Air Force Base, but they were brought in off-site. So here was the first pass by Sean Lenahan. This gives you an idea what it looks like. You've got the winter scene here. We've got the parkas. We've got the four men. We've got the tip-up angle. We've got the hieroglyphic writing. We've got the furry flanges. It's checking all the boxes. So let me go to the next one here. This was another version. This is by Ben Lewis. It's a reputable entry. The guy did a pretty good job here.
This is a good one too.
Yeah, they're all good. They all kind of have a different style. So let me go ahead and hit you with the winner here. This was the winner.
Oh.
So he won the prize. So this is
Yeah.
Skylar Stallings. Want to give him credit. And this is almost at the theoretical limit of what we can achieve with AI. And what you end up doing here is you use AI for your background. You use 3D Studio Max or another 3D rendering to get the craft to be one-to-one, because you have to model the craft from scratch. You cannot type this in. You'll never get it. And then you finish up with Photoshop, which gives you the personnel and the equipment. So in point of fact, what you end up with then is a hybrid illustration. So now I want to hit you with a late entry, and this is what we came up with. This might be as close as we're going to get to what this thing actually looked like,
Oh,
but
man.
They recovered it. They recovered it. And there's pictures of this. There's motion picture film reel of this. All of this could be brought on in congressional hearings. All of it could be.
You hear that, Tim? All of it. Speaking of you, Mr. Burchett, and I'm definitely going to be sending him this episode. So,
oh, please do. By all means. By all means. We need to run. Yep. Go ahead.
Imagine seeing that. Because how many pilots have said that they have seen, a craft that look, I mean, the term flying saucer, I know it was kind of convoluted, but these things, a lot of people describe them as like plate on a plate stacked on a plate. And imagine what they see, this thing flying through the air or ogging down, like I just, oh my God, it must be like not real. Like you don't think it's real life.
It's got to be surreal when you come across it in real time. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, imagine being that guy with the camera, just
of
like,
course.
what the hell am I looking at right now? Like it's real, but yeah, geez, man.
Yep. All right, let's continue on here. Okay, so next one, $64 million question. Where are the top secret files on UFO crash retrievals being stored? So if senators and congressmen, if you want to know, here is the location. They are kept in 3 large computer banks spread throughout the country. Number 1, Wright Patterson Air Force Base, Dayton, Ohio. That's no surprise. Number 2, CIA headquarters, McLean, Virginia. Number 3, NSA headquarters, Fort Meade, Maryland. Now, within the Stringfield collection, the witness had a 2-page report about this, and he said at the bottom, quote, "They will bend in any direction to keep them secret." So again, why senators and congressmen can't get access to it is because we're dealing with the big players here. We're dealing with the varsity team. They are not going to let this out easily. So we need to have people in Congress that have teeth, that have authority, that have power to breach this cosmic Watergate, or we're all going to be here another 50 to 80 years, and they're going to keep on kicking this can down the road, and we still won't know what's going on. That's why it's the final curtain call on UFO crash retrievals. This is it. This is it. This is it. All right, continue on. Location of where ET craft are being stored. So we already talked about the files, where that is. Now we want to talk about the craft. Number 1, CIA headquarters, McLean, Virginia. MacDill Air Force Base, Tampa, Florida. Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Goldsboro, North Carolina. So
Now-
here's 3 locations.
Now, all 3 of these locations, especially CIA headquarters in Virginia, they would need to have some sort of underground facility,
Correct.
I think, in order to properly do this secret stuff. Like this, if it's this high level, would you be surprised if any of these locations had underground facilities that were not known to the public?
That doesn't surprise me at all. At all.
Interesting, because it really it's something I've always thought. We hear about it from many people that there's there potentially is even a connection, connecting tunnels to certain Air Force bases, and I don't know what merit there is to that, but
Sure.
these 3 locations, I mean, they're not going to be keeping UFOs where Google can see them.
Oh, well, it's been said that anything important is underground. So that's kind of what they state there. Now, next one, C-119 flying boxcar, Sierra Madre Valley, Mexico, 1951. So I believe this was around 1948 timeframe, because in the report it said it was prior to 1951. So I'm thinking 1948. The primary source was an engineer, and he worked in highway construction. This is page 32 in the book. At least 2 ET bodies were recovered. So you've got this construction engineer, this craft comes down, the United States military flies in a boxcar, flying boxcar, and they ask assistance from this construction engineer. Now, how big is the craft? It's simple. It's a mathematical certainty. We know how large the craft was. How do we know that? Simple. All you got to do is take a tape measure and measure the interior wall distance of the C-119 flying boxcar clamshell aft entryway doors, and that's 9 feet 10 inches wide. So by default, the craft cannot be any more than 9 feet across, because you need 5 inches of clearance on either side. So this is a small craft. This is not a large craft. Go to the next slide here. So here's Rudy's drawing of them kind of pulling the craft on a ramp into these back clamshell bay doors on the C-119 flying boxcar. I'm going to take you to the full color rendering now. And now you can see Joseph rendering of what the scene might look like. The bodies are in the foreground. They were burnt badly. It was not for the faint of heart. And then you can see the clamshell doors are opened up. I'm going to do a blow up of the loading process. And now you can kind of see the craft being loaded into the aft bay of the flying boxcar. Now, when the primary eyewitness knelt down to where the bodies were, and I'm going to move on to where the bodies are, he said that they were very small statured, very small. Their bodies were burnt. So this, again, was not for the faint of heart. And when he kind of went down and touched their faces, their skin came out on his fingers. So this was a gruesome sight. They were badly burnt, according to this primary eyewitness. And they probably have these bodies as well in some type of storage facility. May still be at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Who knows? Or they might have diversified their portfolio. Go ahead.
Well, so I know how I've had him on the show before. He did just ask a question. Do you know Richard Doty asked about so he wanted to clarify what evidence that UAPs are stored at those 3 locations. So
Okay.
I think he missed the part that, so you're pulling from Leonard Stringfield's book.
I'm
What
pulling
was
from
the title?
Leonard Stringfield's book, and which has 119 crash retrieval cases from firsthand military witnesses that loaded the craft onto trailers and also participated in retrieving the bodies.
Yeah, and he followed it up with, "We know some are stored at NTTR and Lockheed location." Now, I think it's fair to say that that would be true, but again, you're just pulling from a certain data set.
Correct, correct. This
So
is strictly Leonard Stringfield.
yeah, I just wanted to clarify that for him and
Yep,
for anyone else who is wondering or
correct.
popping in late.
It's from the book that we showed in the very beginning here. Okay,
Yes.
now next one. Naval Air Station, Sunnyvale, California, 1950, Hangar One. Radar operator is our primary source. This is case B5, page 57. 2 points to think about on this one. Number one, this hangar still exists. Number two, it's so large, it has its own weather inside. That's how big this hangar is. It actually has its own weather.
I was going
During
to
World
say
War II, yep,
it's got to
it's
have its
massive.
own zip code too.
Yeah, that's right. During World War II, it was used as a storage facility for blimps. You could put multiple blimps in this thing. That's how big this hangar is. So our radar operator, he kind of goes through this off-limits double door. When he gets inside, he's challenged by a guard, but he did see a large 100-foot diameter dish-shaped craft on the hangar floor, and it had a little bit of a low-rise dome. There were a series of porthole windows wrapped around the outer circumference. He was challenged immediately and then was escorted out, but he did get to see it. When he got home later, he told his mother, quote, "It was certainly no aircraft of ours," is what he said. So this is coming from this radar operator at Hangar One. So we want to do the full color rendering. Something like this was seen by this radar operator in Hangar One. So very interesting. Go ahead.
Not elevated at all, just kind of resting.
Sitting on the hangar floor. Yes. Sitting on
Huh.
the hangar floor. Yep.
Interesting.
This is according to what he stated within the Stringfield collection. Now, next one, Pentagon 1952 off-limits room. This is a Pentagon office worker, page 152 in the book, case 1. So you've got this office worker. She's at the Pentagon. We believe she went to an underground basement. There is a basement at the Pentagon. She kind of goes into this dark, dusty, murky room. It's not well lit. There's some cardboard boxes. She kind of makes a 180-degree turn. And what does she see? She sees a pickled alien in a large glass jar. And she's shocked to her core. She can't believe what she's seeing. Within a matter of 10 seconds, she feels this hand on her shoulder. It's an MP telling her to get out of the area immediately. But she did see this ET in a large jar. Absolutely shocked to her core. So I thought, let's see if we can do a full color rendering to make this kind of come alive. And this is what I came up with, which may have been seen by this office worker at the Pentagon basement. Now, we want to answer the question, is there really a basement at the Pentagon? Is there such a thing? Is there such a thing? Well, turns out that our good friend Dick Cheney got lost in the basement of the Pentagon. So this Peninsula Times Tribune, March 25th, 1989, new defense chief gets lost in the Pentagon basement. So he was at one of the upper floors in a meeting. He was trying to get to his car. He went into the elevator dropped down. When it opened up, he thought he was going to get to his car, but he kind of got lost in this basement. So yes, there is a Pentagon basement there where they could store who knows what. And we've heard rumors and speculation that different craft debris have been stored at the Pentagon basement. So it checks out here.
How much you want to bet that that if that was the first time he'd been down there, it wouldn't be the last?
That's probably true.
Speaking of people who might have known a thing or two, Mr. Dick Cheney, everybody.
There you go. Okay, continue on. Camp Polk, Louisiana, summer 1953. HJ, we have his name. He's a private in the Army. So this is another one of these firsthand military witnesses. Case A1, page 80 in the book. So I'm giving you the reference, the page number, the case number, so you can follow along here. Now, he saw the entire retrieval operation from beginning to end. And he said that this egg-shaped craft came down. The whole soil area was still warm to the touch. This thing was about 30 feet across. It had a fin that was wrapped around the outer portion of the craft itself that was still rotating when he got there. Now, he said that one humanoid being was carried out of the craft in a stretcher. There were 3 additional ETs that were walking out of the craft being aided by medical personnel. The medical personnel were helping out the other 3. They were about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, oversized head, oversized eyes, slit for a mouth, minute nose. They were wearing a one-piece green tight-fitting flight suit. They had mittens on and they had helmets on. Now, I also want to mention that they had no knee joints. They could only bend at their hips. So they had this step staggering as they were walking across the ground, being helped by this medical personnel. So let's go to the next slide here. And Joseph has kind of really made this come alive. I'm going to give you a full color 3D rendering if we were there when this all went down. I'm going to view in a little bit closer here. Let's go to the next slide. And they all had this one-piece tight-fitting flight suit. They absolutely, he said they were wearing helmets. They had what looked like mittens on. And you can see our boys, our medical personnel, are helping these ETs out of this craft. Let's go to the next slide. Their comrade was being carried off into the back of an ambulance truck, and there was some type of communication going on between their fallen comrade and the others coming out of the craft itself. I'm going to blow this up a little bit closer now so that we can see the fallen comrade, and he was being carried off into the ambulance truck. Now, what happened to these beings? That's what we want to look at now. What happened to the survivors? According to the source, the survivors had been sent to a hospital and put into isolation, but all soon died. He also learned that the cadavers were sent to a medical center near Washington, D.C. What is this medical center near Washington, D.C. that we've heard so much about, associated with bodies, associated with autopsies, technical X-ray reports? Well, it's none other than Walter Reed Army Medical Center that closed in 2011. So that is the place where the bodies were sent, autopsies were there, medical reports, almost ground zero for a lot of this. Now, there's another location as well, Johns Hopkins Hospital, location of ET autopsies. That's talked about within the Stringfield reports as well. So these 2 facilities absolutely had bodies. When all this is going on, the reports, the bodies, tissue samples, absolutely at these locations. It's talked about multiple times within the Stringfield collection.
Oh, I wonder, huh?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting, because if, I mean, we're carrying them out, we're bringing them to hospitals. I mean, are we at some, we're progressing on in the years.
Correct.
Do you think that we, in the span of time that, you know, we started talking to them at any point, or are we just, these things, I know we're kind of speculating at this point.
Mm-hmm.
We're going out of the work, but, I mean, they're ushering off to hospitals, and is this all for observation and human gain?
I can tell you from a source that I have, and her source was her father. Now, this doesn't address your question about communication, but her father was high-level military brass. He was crying uncontrollably one day, and this woman went to her father and said, "What's wrong? Why are you so upset?" All he would say is, quote, "A handshake has been made." So we have made contact, according to this source. There's no reason for this guy to lie. Now, I'm sure they probably established some type of two-way communication, be it through mental telepathy, something else, or an outside external box that they could translate language. That's possible. But at the very least, contact has been made. A handshake has been made. All right, let's move on to the next one. This one I really like. This is Wright Patterson Air Force Base, 1953. I'm going to give you his name, Michael Ulvey, Army Reserves, warrant officer, page 15, abstract number 8 in the book. So it's Wright Patterson Air Force Base, 1953. I believe it went down at hangar complex number 4. The very last bay is Bay E. So you've got this 4-engine cargo transport DC-7 that taxis up onto the tarmac at Wright Patterson Air Force Base, probably pulls right up to this hangar. And I'm going to go to the next slide here. And this shows you the DC-7 with the aft port cargo bay door opened up. And picture this entire scene going inside the hangar now. So once the DC-7 taxis up onto the tarmac, the whole aircraft rolls into the hangar bay doors close, cargo bay door opens up, and then a forklift starts unloading these pallets. On one of these pallets, he said that there were 3 wooden crates, and he was standing a couple feet away from this when all this went down. These 3 crates had their top lids pulled off, and so he's looking inside these crates, and what did he see? He saw 3 ET bodies, about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, all wearing a one-piece tight-fitting flight suit, oversized head, oversized eyes, slit for a mouth, minute nose. He said one of them had breasts, so he believed it was female. All 3 were being suspended off the bottom of the crates by a white-colored netting to protect them from the dry ice freezer burn below. And he's looking at all of this. He can't believe this. Now, he also heard about debris also being transported in the same DC-7 as well. So there were other crates nearby that had debris from this crash retrieval. So what I want to do now is I want to use this as a guide, and we'll go to the full color rendering. And this is what we came up with back in 1953 at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. So if we have congressmen and senators in Washington, D.C. that want to know about what was retrieved, they could run this case to the ground because we've got the bodies, we've got crates of debris there. All of this could be brought out in congressional hearings.
So the boxes were marked
the boxes had debris within them associated with the crash retrieval.
Right, but in the artistry,
correct.
Is that a liberty that was taken, or
this is something we put on there? This is something they probably stamped it with something.
Okay,
they
okay,
had to stamp it with something. Yeah,
because you see what I would be a little thwarted to say that something marked top secret wouldn't have a cover on it.
Well, in this case, the covers were pulled off as the forklift was dropping this down to the hangar floor, and he was in the close proximity. His report is about 2 pages long, and he describes this whole thing in great detail. So what I want to do now is I want to increase the angle of orientation and give you a 90-degree top view looking down, and now we can see these bodies in closer detail here. And this is all from this warrant officer. No reason to doubt what he said.
No
credible witness.
The middle one with the breasts.
We believe so. Yeah, we have to be period correct here, but this is what he described. Yes, this is what he described.
This is a good. It's a very so we're seeing that most of these beings that we've seen or that are documented in this book, they are humanoid to some degree.
Humanoid looking, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So you're humanoid looking, right? Correct. All right. So reference number 16, alien autopsy performed at Walter Reed Hospital. The cadaver was described as being 3 feet in height with a large head, protruding brow, sunken eyes, which wrapped around the side of the face, very long arms, gray skin. Source, pathologist at the Cleveland Clinic via Dr. Stanley Tytko, 1952 to 1953. So here's another reference of this Walter Reed Hospital associated with the bodies here. Now, I want to talk about what they look like. So within the Stringfield collection, there's 3 pages devoted to autopsies, pathologist report, medical doctor reports, x-ray technician reports, and they give you details of what the bodies look like. So I got some bullet items here. 3.5 to 4.5 feet tall, 2 round almond sunken in eyes without pupils, heavy brow ridge, large hairless head by human standards, no earlobes, no definitive nose, small slit for a mouth, very thin neck, small torso wearing a metallic flexible garment, arms described as long and thin, reaching down to the knees, hands having 4 fingers without a thumb, slight webbing, short and thin legs, no toes, skin color beige, tan, brown, tan, pinkish gray. So if we take all of this information from the first-hand medical doctors and the pathologist report, and we incorporated this into a drawing, we're going to end up with something that looks like this. And I believe this is the most accurate rendering based on the medical reports of people who autopsied these bodies. This checks the boxes. We've got the oversized head. We've got the brow ridge. We've got the wraparound eyes. We've got the webbing between the fingers. We've got the emaciated body parts, arms that go down below the knees here. It's checking the boxes. So this is page 46 and 47 within the Stringfield publication. I want to give you the references of where I'm getting this. Mm-hmm.
And this actually kind of reminds me of the Virginia being.
A little bit.
With the 3 ridges, just some similarities, but interesting.
A little bit. Yep, a little bit. So let's see if we can commit this to a full color rendering. And something like this is being recovered by our military personnel and being sent to Walter Reed Medical Center. At least, I would say 4 cases within Stringfield collection minimum. That's a minimum of 4 cases. All right, next one. Walker Air Force Base, New Mexico, April 12, 1954. This is a photographer. He was only 18 years of age, but this guy was a genius. This is an Air Force photographer. He served between 1954 and 1955. It's page 82 in the book. This guy was only 18 years old. He knew about cameras, exposures, settings. He was a genius about cameras. Now, I want to mention that Walker Air Force Base used to be called Roswell Army Airfield, home of the 509th Bomb Group. We're talking about the same place here. It's just renamed Walker Air Force Base. So what happened? Well, he was told to board an H-19 helicopter. It looked just like this photograph that I've shown right here. He was with 3 other members of his team. They board this H-19 helicopter. They close the door. Over the PA address system, the pilot says, quote, "Men, this is not a drill. This is a red alert scramble." So they take off from Walker Air Force Base. They head northbound. The major highway is to their right. They make a 45-degree left turn. They're heading northwest toward Corona. And it's starting to get a little bit dark here. They go over this little bit of a hill, and what do they actually see? Well, they came across a 50-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that augured in at about a 45-degree angle. He's hovering above this scene in the helicopter, told to open up the doors, and now he's taking photographs because this whole helicopter is shining a spotlight down on the scene, and he got very close-up photographs of this entire scene. Now, again, this thing was 50 feet in diameter. It has a series of multicolored lights wrapped around the outer circumference that were still rotating. It had a low-rise dome on top. He could see that there were 4 bodies laying near the craft. Now, next thing is the helicopter lands near where this thing came down. And the second that he walked out the helicopter, 2 things became readily apparent. Number one, the entire localized area had this pungent odor of automobile battery acid. That's the first thing. It had this battery acid smell. Number 2 is that he saw lights approaching the where this thing came down. This was the beginning of the retrieval operation. So there were trucks, troop transports, there were jeeps. I mean, he was there before they got there, and these were the lights approaching the area. Now, when he got out of the helicopter and was walking toward the craft, he couldn't walk any closer. There were military police there telling him you're not supposed to get any closer, but he also found out that there was an additional 2 bodies found inside the craft for a grand total of 6 bodies recovered. I'm going to take you to the full color rendering, and this is what we came up with full color rendering. Here shows you what the scene looked like back in New Mexico, 1954 timeframe. And this has all been documented by photographs. They got very close, high-res photographs of this entire scene.
My God. My God.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so go ahead.
So does he not? He didn't even touch Roswell in this book.
He talks about Roswell in the book. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. All right. I just hadn't seen it. So,
oh yeah.
But this is New Mexico. I mean, this is the craft, that many people report seeing. And I find it interesting that they're auguring in, and there's been so many reports. So what's the explosion? Why are these things here? I know it's the $1 million question, but man,
Sure.
I would want to know.
Well, if we go back to the research of Harry Drew, who is the expert on the Kingman not crash retrieval but soft landing, he clearly indicates that there was a triangulated radar range with very high-powered radar, where there was a corridor where these craft came flying by, and somehow this high-powered radar system interacted with the navigational system on this craft, and it slowly settled down. And that may be what we're seeing in a lot of these cases, where there might be a high-powered radar, there might be a directed energy weapon, there could be a scalar weapon that are being used to target, track, and shoot these things down.
Right.
That could be what we're looking at. Yep.
That's what I like to address the most is people are like, well, again, these things are so advanced. Why are they coming down? Well, we might have an answer in the, check out the locations. They tend to be near military bases.
They do. They absolutely do.
Important ones,
Well, 509th Bomb Group, home of the atomic bomb. So it would be very important, absolutely here. The other Roswell, 1955, across the Texas-Mexican border south of Langtry, Texas. So I want to give credit to Noe and Ruben, who did all the legwork tracking this one down. In a nutshell, what we've got are 4 B-47s heading southbound near southern Texas, heading westbound. They're being escorted by 16 F-86 Sabre jets. All of a sudden, this disc-shaped craft goes right by their flight path, and this one F-86, which you see in this illustration here, he peels away from the flight group, and he watches as this thing augers in just south of the Rio Grande River. He makes a left-hand turn. I'm going to go to the next slide here, and you can see the push pin here is Eagle's Nest. And you've got the Texas-Mexican border, you've got Rio Grande, and we've got this thing narrowed down plus or minus 200 feet. We know it came down south of Langtry, Texas, on the Texas-Mexican border, just south of the Rio Grande River. And so where you see this Eagle's Nest, if you go just a little bit south of that on the other side of the river, that's where this thing came down. Literally, probably plus or minus 300 feet. So once he makes that left-hand turn and starts heading northbound, where did he go? Well, he landed at Carswell Air Force Base. He got out of his F-86 Sabre jet. He drove to Corsicana Municipal Airport that you see on the upper right. He was joined by a friend. They both pile in a 2-seat tail dragger Aranca and fly back to the crash site before it got dark. So I'm going to take you there now. So now we've got our primary eyewitness as his friend. They've landed. That's what you see in the right foreground. The craft was 25 feet in diameter. It left a debris trail as it came in. It had a dome on top that flipped up, tipped off, and was further downrange. Now, there were about 90 Mexican military personnel at the scene. And what I thought was interesting is Ruben told me that the Mexican military was going off into the back of the 6x6 troop transport that you see in the upper left of the drawing. They were pulling out blankets. They were laying the blankets down onto the warm debris And once the blankets were warm, they were taking them and wrapping them around their bodies because it was still getting a little bit cold out. I thought that was a very interesting historical case. Now, there were, yep, go ahead.
That is such a, that's like one of those details that you just don't, like, you can't script that, you know?
You can't script. I know. I thought that was a historical point. That's something that you really wouldn't think that would be a hoaxed little type of a historical
Detail.
footnote, but I think it's very interesting. Yep. Now, there were at least 4 bodies recovered. They were mangled and burnt. So if you see the hull breach on the side of the craft, I'm going to zoom in here and take you a little bit closer to the side of the craft here. And according to Air Force pilot Robert Willingham, who's our firsthand witness, quote, their arms look like broomsticks. So these had these emaciated body parts like we talked about before on the other slide. So I'm going to go to the full color rendering here. And this shows you the scene. This is back in 1955, south of the Rio Grande River. You can see the debris trail. You've got the dome popped off. And what I want to do now is view a little bit closer to where our primary eyewitness looked inside the hull breach. And this is what we came up with. It was not for the faint of heart. It was a gruesome scene, but that's what he described as he looked in the craft just across the Rio Grande River. All right, now, next one. Wright Patterson Air Force Base, 1955. Our primary eyewitness is Mrs. G. She worked in the Foreign Materials Division. Information provided to Leonard Stringfield via Charles Wilhelm. This is page 17, abstract 12 in the book. So think of this as being the closing scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones, where they have this big warehouse and all this shelving. She worked in that kind of an environment here. So Wright Patterson Air Force Base, 1955, Mrs. G. And I'm going to take you to War Operations Building 258. This is almost identical to the environment that she worked in. Now, according to Mrs. G, she cataloged 1,000 components that were coming in from the interior of a recovered UFO. And I'm going to repeat that a second time. Her job was to catalog 1,000 components and hardware that came in from the interior of a UFO crash retrieval. So when we hear about senators and congressmen, well, we don't have any evidence. Well, go talk to Mrs. G. She cataloged 1,000 components from one of these things. So it's her word against the government. So I'm going to go on a little bit further here. Now, this is Rudy's drawing that documents kind of what they had set up. They had this thing set up like an assembly line. So when the debris came in, they had one gentleman that was taking photographs of the debris. Then they moved it to the next station, and this guy was bagging and tagging the debris. Then they moved it over to Mrs. G, and she cataloged it. Now, obviously, if you have 1,000 components, you've got to have shelving. You've got to have room for everything. So we started populating all of the shelves with all this ET debris. Now, I don't know what it looked like, right? I wasn't there. So we had to come up with something that would kind of like document what this may have looked like. Now, while our primary eyewitness is getting all this recorded, she said that there was a mobile dolly cart that went right by her desk that had 2 deceased ET corpses in formaldehyde preservation fluid go right by her desk. She saw these 2 ET corpses. And just before she died, she said the following, quote, "Uncle Sam can't do anything to me once I'm in my grave." 6 months later, she died. We got her testimony just in time.
Damn. So Congress can't go talk to Mrs. G.
Well, we can't talk to her now, but the debris is there. The catalog is there. The records are there. The photographs are there. It's all there. It's all there. 1,000 components were recovered.
Yeah, those things don't just go missing.
No, they don't go missing. They don't go missing. So here's our full color rendering of what this may have looked like. So you got Mrs. G kind of in the background right. You've got the photographer. We've got the preservation of the bodies. We've got all the different debris populating the shelving here. Something like this back in 1955 was going on at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. And we want to honor the testimony of Mrs. G because she's a pioneer. She's a patriot. Why would this woman lie? Why would this woman lie? She knew she was dying of cancer and she let it all hang out. Why would she lie? However, I want to mention that we don't have to rely on Mrs. G alone. We have an independent second source that backs her up, okay? I want to take you to June Crane. People that are involved in this type of research know about June Crane. She grew up in Dayton, Ohio. She was intimately involved in the library system. She's just a credible woman. Worked for the United States government between 1942 to 1952. Worked in classified laboratories. She had a Q clearance. She held ET debris at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Stated that by 1952, the U.S. government had been involved in 3 UFO crash retrieval operations. Spoke to a pilot that stated that he flew in ET bodies and wreckage. So if you want to know more about her, this book talks about it. Tell My Story, June Crane, Air Force and UFOs by James Clarkson. He interviewed this woman over a period of 4 years and took detailed notes of exactly everything that she told him. Very credible witness. When you put these 2 women together, now you got yourself a case. Now you cannot deny it anymore, you know.
Both at Wright Field, both
Wright Patterson Air Force Base, yes.
Very intriguing.
Yep. So why would she lie? She's involved in the reference library. Her name is on the plaque there to this day. She's a very reputable woman, no longer with us. But again, why would this woman lie to us?
Yeah.
No reason to lie to us at all.
Had a Q clearance. I mean,
had a Q clearance. Yep.
Yeah, those people tend to be, and people forget like how patriotic it, you know, to be an American after World War II, you were very proud to be an American.
Absolutely.
And your country and honor, that meant something to you. So for these people who had those clearances to come out later in life after seeing kind of what happened with that information and that material could be very telling.
Absolutely. You got it. Actionable item. Since over 1,000 components of physical ET hardware exist, this evidence should be tracked down by senators and congressmen with the appropriate security clearances and should be presented in open public congressional hearings. That's what needs to happen. This hardware needs to be put into congressional hearings. It's there. It's there.
Mr. Burchett, that is one thing he did say, is he said he's not going to stop until they can wheel the smoking gun in front of the public. Like that's what he wants to do, is he wants to be able to roll something out and say, there it is. Just so you guys have it. You know, there's your extraordinary evidence. So
I hope that's the case. I hope that's the case. I think we got time for 2 more here. So this is retired Air Force pilot, late 1950s. Interview conducted by Ed Cameron Jr. This is a 5 to 6 minute movie clip. And what he talks about is seeing a 60-foot diameter dish-shaped craft, about 10-foot wide gash on the upper dome. It has a series of windows wrapped around the outer circumference. And he saw within this 6-minute film clip, it kind of cut to another scene. So the first scene was the interior, the hangar with the craft. And then it cut to another scene that showed this display panel with iconology. There were lettering, there were symbols, there were star charts there. There were 3 bodies recovered about 5 feet tall. That's within this 6-minute film clip here. And I'm going to do a blow up of what we believe to be the propulsion system and one of these display panels. I'm going to take you to my full color rendering so that we can kind of make this come alive. And something like this was documented. They've got this on film too. So not only do we have the bodies, we've got the craft, we've got the 8x10 black and white glossy photographs, and we've got the motion picture film reel to back all this up. So this kind of gives you an idea of what this may have looked like within this 5 to 6 minute film clip here. All right, this is another one. Wright Patterson Air Force Base, 1962. And we're dealing with a group of transient pilots, so credible witnesses, at least 5 pilots. They were part of the 354th Tactical Air Command Fighter Wing, Wright Patterson Air Force Base, 1962. This is page 88 in the book, case A6. They're jogging down the row of hangars. One of these hangar doors was opened up. They run inside because they're looking for this fourth wall to complete their handball court. And they walk into this 15-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. It's propped up on 2 engine test stands, and there's military police with weapons guarding this. And what one of these guys says to one of our pilots, I thought was very interesting. I'm going to go to the full color rendering, kind of gives you an idea of what this may have looked like back in 62 at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. So like as we go through these, the craft count goes up, the body count goes up, and it's no longer a deniable issue at this point because we've got firsthand military witnesses. But I want to hit you with what this guy said. Here's what he said when he was challenged by this guard here. He said, "The guard challenged by saying, 'I don't think you're supposed to be here, sir.' I replied to the affirmative, and we turned about face and departed, mumbling to ourselves that the good old U.S. had developed or had all along flying saucers in service." So here's another one of these cases where you've got military pilots actually seeing flying saucers in these hangars at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. Okay, we'll do one more. Braniff International Airways here. This plays a role. Go ahead.
Well, yep. I find that story you just took, that one, to be very in the realm of what we just spoke about, right? He's patriotic. He turns around and he's like, "Hey, at least it's us who has them," right?
That's exactly correct. That's exactly correct. So that's why that case, it just rings true. Why would this guy lie? Why would he lie? All right, reference number 53, 1963. Source is PJ. We have his name. He originally served as a captain in the Navy, and later he flew for Braniff International Airways. He was at Wright Patterson Air Force Base back in 1963. He encountered 2 flying saucers in a hangar there. One was 30 feet in diameter and could hold 12, he said. There was a second craft that he said could carry 2. So he saw 2 flying saucers inside a hangar at Wright Patterson Air Force Base. And we'll kind of wrap this up with this case from Ryan Wood here. This is Santa Rosa, New Mexico, spring 1963. This is page 217 in his book. Our primary eyewitness was a radar. She was an X-ray technician. She was not a registered nurse. She was an X-ray technician. She was 24 years of age. A call came from the dispatcher about a crash of an unknown craft across town. So she piles in with the doctor into one of these 1963 Ford Galaxy ambulance cars. They drive across town, and when they get there, what does she see? Number one, she sees 2 squad cars at the scene, and there's 2 police officers. She gets out, and her first thought was, where are their parents? She sees at least 3 ET bodies, 3.5 feet tall. They look like children, and so they load up the bodies into the back of the ambulance. They drive this back to the hospital, and then something very interesting happens. Here's our full color rendering that gives you an idea of what this may have looked like. This is by Thomas Jane. I did one as well. I don't think it's as good as what he did, but this can just give you an idea of what this scene may have looked like at the crash scene itself. Now, I want to hit you with how this kind of ended here. Within an hour of arriving at the hospital, the United States Air Force arrived and ordered all 3 bodies to be removed. They also confiscated all paperwork, notes, graphs, charts, and even undeveloped X-rays. The X-ray technician said she saw a flatbed truck outside with an object that was covered by a tarp. So not only did they get the 3 bodies, but they got the craft as well. Now, here's where this Air Force colonel came in and told her this, quote, he told her, "This did not happen. You are never to speak about this. And remember this, the government has a long arm." So what I want to do in this presentation is just give you a brief overview of some of the mission critical crash retrieval cases within the Stringfield collection. The goal here is to make these cases come alive and preserve an important part of our national history by committing these to well-referenced and refined drawings and full color renderings. And I want to thank you for having me join you today.
Well, I would love to. I'd love to follow this up with the rest and go through more of that research.
Sure.
This was really, really fun. I personally love this kind of it's a presentation. It's fun for me to I kind of just get to kick back and make my
Sure.
comments and
Yep.
learn. Most of those cases, actually, I would say 99% of those cases I did not know about.
Mm.
And it's because you're right. The Stringfield books are very, I mean, you
Cool.
have to be strict in how you read them. They are heavy reading,
They are.
like you said. So I think it's a tremendous benefit that you have gone in and kind of extrapolated some of the data and brought that data to life for people to see and hear. So again, I think the work that you're doing is absolutely tremendous.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Where can people, if they want to find more about your research, if they want to hear more about your research and get a good look at it, how
Sure.
can people do that?
Okay, I'm on Facebook, I'm on X, and I'm also on YouTube. My YouTube channel is just my name, Michael Schratt.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
I'll link them all below. That way, anyone who is listening in the future, you guys can check out Michael on all of his platforms. As we like to say, Michael, you've been our best guest thus far. Every guest is the best thus far. And we truly appreciate what you've done for the topic of UFOs, how much of your time that you've put into it. And
Mhm.
I just want to remind everyone that it's going to take all of us to run the ball into the end zone. It's
Yes,
not a one player game. It's going to
that
take,
is correct.
it's going to take us all coming together. So keep up the great work, Michael, and we'll definitely be talking soon.
Okay, thanks a lot. Mhm.
All right, guys. And for everyone else, make sure to like, share, subscribe. And if you're listening on any one of those amazing podcast platforms, please leave us a review. And you can rate us like with the 5 stars. And sometimes you can even leave a written review. You'd be surprised at how much it helps. And it's free. So get on it. Keep your eye to the sky because you never know what might fly by or apparently crash. All right, guys. See you next time.
Cool.